Lucas Brennan adjusted the straps of his worn backpack and surveyed the expanse of wilderness before him. The early morning sun cast long shadows across the Cascade Mountains, painting the rugged terrain with hues of gold and emerald green. He inhaled deeply, savoring the crisp air that carried the faint scent of pine and damp earth. Lucas had always found solace in these solitary hikes, away from the noise of the world, armed only with his camera and an insatiable curiosity for nature's raw beauty. Today's destination was Evergreen Ridge, a remote location he had researched meticulously. It was said to offer unparalleled views of the Oregon Valley below, but more importantly, it was rumored to be home to elusive wildlife rarely seen by human eyes. Lucas had envisioned capturing a moment that would make the cover of National Geographic, a shot so compelling it would tell its own story. As he trudged along the uneven trail, the crunch of gravel beneath his boots was the only sound breaking the silence. He paused occasionally to snap photos of the towering evergreens or the play of light on the rocky slopes. Each step felt like a step closer to the extraordinary. The trail narrowed as he climbed higher, the drop-off to his right growing more precarious with every turn. Lucas's heart raced with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. He had been on countless expeditions before, but something about this one felt different, as if the forest itself was drawing him deeper into its secrets. Suddenly, a faint, high-pitched sound reached his ears. He stopped, his senses sharpening. It was a cry, weak but persistent. His heart quickened as he scanned the area, trying to pinpoint its source. The sound came again, more desperate this time. Carefully stepping closer to the edge, Lucas peered over. His breath caught in his throat. Just below, on a narrow ledge, a tiny bear cub clung to the rocky outcrop. Its small frame quivered with fear as it let out another plaintive cry. The cub's dark eyes darted around, searching for a way out, but the jagged rocks above and the sheer drop below left no escape. Lucas quickly assessed the situation. The cub had likely slipped while exploring, and its mother was nowhere in sight. The ledge it stood on was barely wide enough to support it, and the violent river far below made the scene even more perilous. He felt a pang of helplessness mixed with a surge of responsibility. "I can't just leave it there," he whispered to himself. But how could he help without putting himself in danger? His mind raced with possibilities. Retrieving rope from his backpack, he contemplated if it could support him while he attempted a rescue. Lucas's heart pounded as he tightened the rope around his waist, securing it to a sturdy pine tree rooted firmly in the rocky soil. The cub's cries grew sharper, tugging at him with an urgency he couldn't ignore. Against his better judgment, he decided to act, fully aware of the risks. He knew that climbing down would put his life in danger, but the thought of leaving the helpless animal to its fate gnawed at him. The idea of the cub slipping further and plummeting into the roaring river below was unbearable. He rummaged through his backpack and pulled out a carabiner and a makeshift harness fashioned from straps he carried for his camera gear. He hesitated briefly, testing the strength of each knot with trembling hands. This was not what he had prepared for when he set out that morning. He muttered under his breath, reasoning with himself, reminding himself of the potential dangers, but the cries of the cub cut through his doubts like a knife. Stepping cautiously to the edge, Lucas glanced down at the ledge. The distance was greater than he had initially estimated, and the jagged rocks made the descent even more treacherous. His muscles tensed as he began lowering himself, gripping the rope tightly. Each step brought him closer to the cub, but also closer to danger. His boots struggled to find solid footing on the crumbling rock face, and loose pebbles skittered down, disappearing into the depths below. Halfway down, his heart sank as he considered the possibility of the cub's mother returning. A protective bear could appear out of nowhere, and there would be no escape if she perceived him as a threat. He scanned the area, his senses heightened, but the wilderness remained eerily quiet. Even the usual chirping of birds seemed to have faded, leaving only the sound of the river's relentless roar. As he descended further, Lucas's mind wavered between fear and determination. The cub had stopped crying and was now staring at him, its small body trembling as it pressed itself against the rocky wall. The animal's vulnerability strengthened Lucas's resolve. He reassured himself with every movement, telling himself that he could do this, that he would save the cub and make it back to the top unharmed, but the cliffside had other plans. His foot slipped on a loose rock, sending a jolt of adrenaline through him. He clung to the rope, his knuckles white as he tried to steady himself. For a brief moment, his mind screamed at him to turn back, to abandon the rescue and save his own life. The seriousness of his situation became painfully clear, and yet the cub's wide, pleading eyes held him captive. Finally, Lucas reached the ledge. His feet landed on the narrow outcrop, and he pressed his back against the cliff for balance. The cub backed away slightly, unsure of his presence but too exhausted to resist. Lucas moved slowly, speaking in a calm, soothing tone, hoping to gain the animal's trust. The cub whimpered, but didn't try to escape, its small body trembling with fear and exhaustion. Lucas remained still for a moment, careful not to startle it. His own body was tense, his muscles taut from the climb and the sheer danger of his position. He knew any sudden movement could either frighten the cub or send them both tumbling into the abyss below. He crouched low, balancing precariously on the narrow ledge, and began murmuring softly. His voice was steady, though his heart pounded loudly in his chest. He didn't know if the cub could understand the tone of his words, but he hoped it could feel his calm. He made no sudden movements, allowing the cub to observe him. Its dark eyes darted to his face, then to his hands, before glancing nervously at the sheer drop behind it. Lucas reached into his backpack slowly, pulling out the cloth sling he had prepared earlier. The cub flinched at the motion, its tiny paws scrabbling against the rock in panic. Lucas froze, murmuring again in a steady rhythm. He took another step closer, his feet finding purchase on the unsteady ledge. He felt the rock shift slightly under his weight, and his stomach clenched. The cub's breathing was rapid, its fear palpable. Lucas stretched out the cloth, holding it open as gently as he could. The cub whimpered, unsure but too weak to resist. Slowly, he edged closer, finally reaching the cub. Its fur was coarse under his fingers as he carefully scooped it into the sling. The cub struggled briefly, but his murmured reassurances seemed to soothe it. Just as Lucas secured the sling around his chest, he heard a sharp crack. The sound of a loose rock giving way echoed through the canyon. Before he could react, his footing slipped. His body lurched sideways, the rope jerking violently against his harness. He swung dangerously over the ledge, one hand grasping desperately at the rock face. Pain shot through his shoulder as he slammed against the cliffside, the force jarring him. For a terrifying moment he thought the rope might give way. His mind raced, his breath coming in shallow gasps. The cub whimpered in the sling, its tiny body pressing tightly against him. Summoning every ounce of strength, Lucas pushed himself upright. His injured shoulder throbbed with each movement. He steadied himself on the ledge, his legs trembling. As he adjusted his grip on the rope, the climb back up now seemed even more difficult, his shoulder aching with every pull, the pain sharp and unrelenting. But the weight of the cub against his chest reminded him of why he couldn't give up. The ascent was agonizingly slow. Each step felt heavier, the strain on his injured arm making it nearly unbearable. Sweat dripped down his face, stinging his eyes. He focused on the rope, on the small, reassuring tug of the tree above holding his weight. Finally, with one last pull, Lucas hoisted himself and the cub over the edge. He collapsed onto the solid ground, his chest heaving as he gasped for air. The cub let out a soft cry, still trembling in the sling. Lucas lay there for a moment, the pain in his shoulder, a dull throb now. Relief washed over him as he unfastened the sling and carefully placed the cub on the soft earth. The cub looked at him, its wide eyes filled with what Lucas could only describe as cautious trust. He leaned back against the tree, his body aching. But his heart full, he had done it. But something told him this ordeal wasn't over. The forest seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for the next chapter of this unexpected adventure to unfold. Lucas's mission of capturing the forest's beauty through his lens flashed through his mind, a bittersweet reminder of how far things had spiraled from his original plan. His camera bag, once neatly packed with high-end lenses and tools, now lay battered and scattered. The fall down the ravine had left some of his equipment damaged beyond repair. The glass of his favorite lens cracked and its frame bent. The tripod was nowhere to be found, likely lost during the scramble to save the cub. He glanced at the shattered pieces and felt a pang of disappointment. Those tools had been his way of preserving the forest's essence, of showing the world the hidden wonders of this untamed land. But now his focus had shifted entirely. Instead of snapping pictures, he was living the raw, untamed reality of nature, dangerous, unpredictable, and deeply humbling. Lucas barely had a moment to collect himself when a low, rustling sound came from the nearby bushes. His muscles tensed, the relief he had felt seconds ago replaced by a jolt of fear. His eyes darted to the cub, now sitting on shaky legs and letting out a tiny, plaintive cry. The sound grew louder, and then she appeared, a massive figure emerging from the shadows of the trees. The mother bear was enormous, her dark fur glistening in the sunlight, her powerful frame moving with deliberate intent. Her sharp eyes locked onto Lucas and the cub. Lucas froze, his breath caught in his throat. He knew that running wasn't an option. Any sudden movement could provoke her. The mother bear advanced slowly, her gaze shifting between her cub and the strange human sitting mere feet away. Lucas braced himself, his body rigid, prepared for the worst. His injured shoulder throbbed as he tried to appear non-threatening. The mother bear stopped a few feet from the cub, her massive frame towering over them both. For a tense moment, she stood still, her eyes fixed on Lucas. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. But then something unexpected happened. The bear leaned down, nudging her cub gently with her nose. The cub responded with a soft cry, stumbling toward her. The mother bear's gaze returned to Lucas. There was no aggression in her posture, no hint of anger. Instead, there was something else, something almost like understanding. Her dark eyes lingered on him, and Lucas felt a strange sense of connection. It was as if she recognized his intentions and understood that he had saved her cub. The bear turned slowly, guiding her cub toward the forest. Lucas watched, his body still tense, as the pair disappeared into the trees. Just before vanishing, the mother bear looked back one last time. Her gaze held an almost human-like quality, a silent acknowledgement that left Lucas in awe. When they were gone, Lucas collapsed back against the tree, his body finally relaxing. The forest was quiet. Once more, but his heart was full. It was a moment he would never forget, a reminder of the delicate balance between humans and the wild. Lucas returned home, still shaken, but deeply moved by his encounter with the mother bear and her cub. His cabin, nestled at the edge of the forest, felt like a sanctuary. The quiet surroundings were comforting, yet something about the experience lingered. He couldn't shake the feeling that the mother bear's gaze had been more than just a look. It had carried a depth, almost as though she had made a silent promise. The first strange occurrence happened 2 nights later. Lucas stepped outside in the early morning light, carrying his camera gear. On the ground near his cabin, he noticed deep claw marks etched into the wooden post of his porch. The marks were fresh, the edges splintered as if they had been made only hours before. His first thought was of a wandering bear, but the positioning of the marks, low and deliberate, felt different, as though they were meant to be noticed. Brushing it off as coincidence, Lucas continued with his day, but later, as he walked along a nearby trail, he saw something unusual. A small pile of berries and roots sat neatly on a rock, untouched and oddly placed. Nearby animals, especially deer and smaller creatures, would have devoured such food quickly. Yet it was as though the offering had been left undisturbed, as if intended for him. Lucas felt a chill run down his spine. He glanced into the trees, scanning the forest edge, but saw nothing. Still, he couldn't shake the sense of being watched. That night, as he prepared for bed, a faint rustling outside his cabin caught his attention. Peeking through the window, he saw nothing out of place, but the forest seemed quieter than usual. Days passed and the strange occurrences continued. Each morning, Lucas found more signs. A fresh claw mark on a nearby tree. Small piles of food arranged neatly along his usual paths. It wasn't random. It felt intentional, as though someone or something was trying to communicate. Then, one quiet afternoon, Lucas spotted them. Standing at the edge of the forest, just beyond the clearing of his cabin, was the mother bear. Her cub stood close by, still small but visibly stronger than when he had rescued it. The mother bear's gaze was fixed on Lucas, calm and steady. She didn't move closer, nor did she make a sound. Lucas felt a mixture of awe and unease. He stood frozen on his porch, watching the bears as they watched him. The cub seemed curious, taking small steps forward before retreating back to its mother's side. Lucas didn't dare move, unsure of what the mother bear wanted or why she had returned. After what felt like an eternity, the bear nudged her cub gently and turned back toward the forest. They disappeared into the trees, leaving Lucas standing in stunned silence. He didn't know why she had come, but her presence felt deliberate, as if she were watching over him. From that day forward, Lucas noticed more signs of her presence. He found tracks around his cabin, always at a safe distance, and sometimes heard faint rustling in the forest nearby. It was as though the bear had claimed the area around his cabin, ensuring his safety. Lucas couldn't explain it, but he felt an odd sense of protection. The connection between them was undeniable, yet mysterious. Whatever bond had been formed that day on the cliff, it hadn't ended when the bears disappeared into the forest. Had only just begun. Lucas ventured out on another hike a week later, his camera in hand as he explored a new trail. The forest was alive with the sound of birds and the rustle of leaves in the wind. He felt at ease, the earlier unease from the strange events fading into the background. But as he rounded a bend in the trail, the forest fell silent. The sudden absence of sound was unnerving, and Lucas stopped in his tracks. He scanned the trees, his senses alert. A low growl echoed through the woods, deep and menacing. Lucas turned slowly, his heart pounding as he spotted the source of the sound. A mountain lion crouched a few feet away, its golden eyes locked onto him. The predator's muscles were coiled, ready to pounce. Lucas's mind raced, his body frozen, in fear. Just as the mountain lion shifted, preparing to strike, a thunderous roar shattered the silence. From the trees, the mother bear charged forward, her massive frame barreling toward the predator. The mountain lion hesitated, its predatory focus broken by the sudden threat. The bear roared again, louder this time, and the mountain lion bolted into the underbrush, disappearing as quickly as it had appeared. Lucas stood rooted to the spot, his breath shallow as the mother bear turned to face him. Her cub appeared moments later, peeking out from behind a tree. Lucas's shock gave way to a strange sense of gratitude. The bear had saved him. The mother bear didn't linger. She nudged her cub forward, her calm demeanor unchanged. Lucas watched as they retreated into the forest, the same protective air surrounding her. It was then he realized they weren't just watching him, they were protecting him. From that moment, Lucas felt a connection to the bears that went beyond explanation. They had become a part of his life, silent guardians of the wilderness. They all called home. The encounter with the mountain lion had solidified something that Lucas had only suspected before. The bears were actively looking out for him, just as he had looked out for the cub. As the days turned into weeks, Lucas found himself more attuned to the forest and its rhythms. He began to recognize the subtle signs of the bear's presence, a bent twig here, a tuft of fur there. He learned to read the forest in a way he never had before, seeing it not just through the lens of his camera, but through the eyes of its inhabitants. The experience changed Lucas profoundly. His photography, once focused solely on capturing the beauty of nature, now sought to convey the intricate relationships between all living things in the forest. He found himself spending more time observing and less time shooting, learning the stories behind each image he captured. As word of his unique bond with the bears spread, Lucas became something of a local legend. People sought him out, eager to hear his tales of the forest and its guardians. He used this attention to advocate for the protection of the wilderness, sharing his newfound understanding of the delicate balance that existed in these untamed lands. Yet, even as his fame grew, Lucas never forgot the heart of his experience, the silent communication, the mutual respect, and the unexpected kinship he had found with the bears. It was a reminder that in the vast tapestry of nature, every thread was connected, and that sometimes the most profound connections could be forged in the most unlikely of circumstances. Lucas was out in the forest again, his camera ready to capture the beauty of the wild. He followed a trail less traveled, drawn by a strange instinct. The deeper he went, the quieter the forest became. The usual chirping of birds and rustling of leaves faded, replaced by an eerie stillness. As he climbed over a rocky hill, something caught his eye, a shadow moving near a cluster of large boulders. He slowed his pace, his breath shallow, and saw the mother bear. She was standing in front of what looked like a narrow cave entrance, her massive frame blocking the way. The cub peeked out from behind her, its curiosity evident. Lucas stayed still, unsure of what to do. The bear glanced at him, her dark eyes, calm but watchful. Slowly she stepped aside, her movements deliberate, as if granting him permission to approach. Lucas hesitated, but curiosity won over caution. He moved closer, the cool air from the cave brushing against his face. The entrance was tight, but once inside, the space opened up into a small chamber. Lucas's flashlight revealed walls covered in ancient markings, symbols, animals, and what appeared to be human figures. The drawings were crude but striking, etched deeply into the stone. One image stood out, a large bear standing beside a man, their figures intertwined as though they were equals. Lucas felt a chill run down his spine. The markings seemed to tell a story, one he couldn't fully understand. He spent hours photographing the walls, his mind racing with questions. What was this place? And why was the bear guarding it? Back at his cabin, Lucas contacted Dr. Elena Blackwood, a local historian known for her knowledge of the area's folklore. When she arrived, her excitement was palpable. As Lucas described what he had found, Elena listened intently, her expression serious. When he mentioned the drawings, she explained the legend of the guardian bears, an old Native American story passed down through generations. According to the tale, bears chosen by the forest spirit would guard the land and protect those who showed them kindness. The markings in the cave, she suggested, could be tied to this legend. Lucas couldn't believe what he was hearing. He had always respected nature, but never imagined becoming part of something so mystical. Eleanor urged him to be cautious, warning that some legends held power that shouldn't be taken lightly. Still, Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that the bear's actions had meaning, as if they were connected to the ancient story in ways he had yet to understand. He returned to the cave the next day, the markings still drawing his attention. But this time, something else caught his eye. Near the back of the chamber, hidden under loose rocks, he found a small carved stone. The carving was simple but intriguing. It showed a man holding out his hand to a bear cub, while a larger bear stood in the background, watching. Lucas turned the stone over in his hands, its weight solid yet oddly comforting. The carving felt ancient, its edges worn smooth by time. Elena was the first person he thought of. When he showed her the stone, her face lit up with astonishment. She explained that such carvings were rare, often used in ceremonies or as talismans. The image, she said, could be interpreted as a prophecy, a sign of a bond between man and bear. Lucas felt a mix of wonder and disbelief. Could his encounter with the bears truly be part of something foretold? Before he could dwell on it, Eleanor suggested that the bears might be trying to lead him to something deeper. Days later, Lucas noticed a shift in the mother bear's behavior. She no longer kept her distance, but began guiding him through the forest. She would appear at the edge of his cabin, waiting for him to follow. Trusting his instincts, Lucas obliged. She led him to untouched parts of the forest, hidden clearings filled with rare plants, vibrant flowers he'd never seen before, and wildlife that seemed almost unearthly in its beauty. Lucas felt as though he had been given a key to a secret world, one only the bears could unlock. Each step he took deepened the bond between him and the forest. The bears had become more than just creatures of the wild. They were his guides, his protectors. Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that he had been chosen for something greater, a role he didn't yet fully understand. One crisp morning, Lucas set out to photograph a secluded part of the forest that the mother bear had recently shown him. The air was still, too still, and an uneasy feeling settled over him as he noticed broken branches and fresh tracks along the path. The prints weren't from animals. These were boot marks, deep and heavy, heading toward the forest's heart. Lucas quickened his pace, fear gnawing at him. As he reached the clearing, the mother bear and her cub appeared, their movements cautious. The bear sniffed the air, her demeanor tense. Lucas froze as the sound of muffled voices and snapping twigs echoed nearby. He crouched low, scanning the area. Through the dense foliage, he spotted a group of men armed with rifles. Their movements were methodical, their eyes scanning for any sign of prey. Poachers. Lucas's heart sank as he realized the danger. Not only to the bears, but to the fragile ecosystem of the forest. The poachers set up a crude ambush near the clearing, baiting the area with fresh meat to lure wildlife. Lucas stayed hidden, holding his breath as the mother bear led her cub away from the trap. Her instincts were sharp, but the poachers were persistent, moving closer to the bear's retreat. Lucas couldn't stay silent any longer. He threw a rock toward the opposite side of the clearing, creating a loud noise that drew the poachers' attention. They turned, their weapons raised, and headed in the wrong direction. Using the distraction, Lucas moved swiftly to follow the bears, ensuring their safety. The trio found refuge in a thick grove of trees. Lucas whispered reassurances to himself as the mother bear stood protectively over her cub. The tension was palpable, every sound amplified in the silence. They waited until the voices of the poachers faded, the forest swallowing their presence. Lucas knew this wasn't over. Once the coast was clear, he returned to his cabin and immediately contacted local authorities and wildlife protection agencies. He described the poachers' activities and their potential threat to the forest's wildlife. However, his claims were met with skepticism. Without solid evidence, the officials were hesitant to take action. Frustrated but undeterred, Lucas realized he would need to take matters into his own hands. He reached out to Elena, who shared his concern. Together, they began to form a plan to protect the bears and the forest they called home. Lucas and Elena spent the next few days studying the poachers' movements. Using Lucas's knowledge of the forest and Elena's understanding of wildlife behavior, they devised a plan to outwit the intruders. The mother bear, as if sensing their intent, began to cooperate in subtle ways, guiding Lucas to areas where the poachers had recently been active. The plan was simple but risky. Lucas would use his camera traps to capture evidence of the poachers' illegal activities, while Elena coordinated with a wildlife protection agency to bring in reinforcements. The bears, with their keen instincts and strength, would act as a natural deterrent. One evening, Lucas set up a series of bait-free traps near the poachers' usual path. He scattered the area with natural markers that only the bears would recognize, scratches on trees and overturned rocks. The mother bear seemed to understand, her movements deliberate as she led her cub away from danger. The poachers returned the next morning, their traps empty and their frustration evident. They ventured deeper into the forest, unaware that Lucas was tracking their every move from a safe distance. When the poachers stumbled upon the false trail Lucas had created, they split up, hoping to corner their quarry. That's when the mother bear made her move. Emerging from the shadows, she let out a deep, resonant growl that froze the men in their tracks. The cub stayed hidden as the mother bear advanced, her sheer size and presence enough to send two of the poachers scrambling. Lucas coordinated with Elena via a walkie-talkie, signaling her to alert the authorities. Meanwhile, the remaining poachers attempted to regroup, only to find themselves outmatched by the terrain. The forest seemed to turn against them. Hidden roots tripped them, dense foliage blocked their paths, and the oppressive silence unnerved them. The mother bear and Lucas worked in unison, though no words were exchanged. Lucas used his presence to steer the poachers toward a narrow ravine where their escape routes were limited. The bear's roars echoed through the trees, a sound that sent shivers down Lucas's spine, despite knowing he was not her target. As the trap closed in, the poachers found themselves cornered. The authorities arrived, led by Elena and the wildlife protection team. The poachers were apprehended, their illegal weapons and traps confiscated. In the aftermath, Lucas stood in the clearing, the mother bear and her cub nearby. He felt a profound sense of accomplishment, not just for stopping the poachers, but for playing a part in something greater. The forest around him seemed to hum with renewed life, as if acknowledging the victory. Elena approached, her eyes wide with wonder. "You've done it, Lucas," she said softly. "You've become a guardian, just like the bears." Lucas looked at the mother bear, who met his gaze with what he could only describe as approval. He realized then that his journey was far from over. This was just the beginning of his role as a protector of the forest, guided by the ancient wisdom of the guardian bears. The air grew heavy with smoke as Lucas's chest tightened in panic. What began as a tense standoff with the poachers had now turned into a race against a raging forest fire. Somewhere deep in the woods, the dry heat had sparked. An uncontrollable blaze, and the flames were spreading fast. The mother bear's growl cut through the crackling of the fire. She nudged her cub, urging it to move, and Lucas quickly followed, his heart pounding in rhythm with their hurried steps. The forest seemed alive with chaos. Branches snapped overhead, embers floated like fireflies, and the once green sanctuary was cloaked in an orange glow. Behind them, the poachers shouted in desperation. They hadn't anticipated the fire either, and were now caught in the same deadly web. Lucas glanced back, his instincts warring between helping the men and ensuring his own survival. The mother bear growled again, her urgency unmistakable. Lucas pushed forward, knowing he couldn't afford to hesitate. The carved stone in his pocket grew warm, its surface vibrating faintly. Lucas paused, confused by the sensation, but the fire's intensity forced him onward. The path ahead was treacherous, blocked by fallen trees and burning undergrowth. The mother bear, surprisingly calm, led the way, her movements steady and sure. As they neared a steep incline, the ground beneath Lucas gave way, sending him sliding down a rocky slope. He landed hard, the stone tumbling from his pocket and glowing faintly in the ash-covered ground. The mother bear roared, leaping down after him, her cub close behind. Lucas scrambled to his feet, scooping up the stone. Its glow seemed to pulse, lighting a faint path through the dense smoke. The poachers reappeared, their faces streaked with soot, desperation etched into their expressions. They stumbled through the flames, coughing and disoriented, their weapons abandoned in the chaos. For a moment, their eyes met Lucas's, and he saw fear, not malice. But there was no time to dwell on their plight. Lucas followed the bear's lead, trusting her instincts to guide them to safety. The heat was oppressive, the smoke thick and choking. Every breath was a struggle, and Lucas's eyes stung from the acrid air. The cub whimpered, its small frame trembling with each step. Lucas scooped it up, cradling it against his chest as they pushed on. They reached a small stream, the water offering a brief respite from the heat. The mother bear plunged in without hesitation, and Lucas followed suit, the cool water a shocking contrast to the burning air. They waded upstream, the current fighting against their progress. Lucas held the cub high, keeping its head above water. As they moved, the roar of the fire grew distant, but they couldn't stop. Lucas's muscles ached, his lungs burned, and exhaustion threatened to overwhelm him. But the stone in his hand continued to glow, pulsing with an otherworldly energy that seemed to infuse him with strength. The mother bear pressed on tirelessly, her determination unwavering. As they climbed out of the stream onto higher ground, Lucas saw a sight that filled him with hope. A large rock formation loomed ahead, its surface mostly bare of vegetation. It offered a potential sanctuary from the flames. With renewed energy, they scrambled up the rocky face, the bear's claws finding purchase where Lucas's hands slipped. At the top, they found a small plateau, relatively sheltered from the wind. That was driving the fire. Lucas collapsed, gasping for breath, the cub still clutched to his chest. The mother bear stood at the edge, her eyes scanning the burning forest below. The fire raged on, consuming everything in its path, but for now they were safe. As night fell, the forest glowed an eerie orange. Lucas sat with his back against a boulder, the cub curled up beside him, finally asleep. The mother bear kept vigil, her massive form silhouetted against the fiery backdrop. Lucas turned the carved stone over in his hands, its glow now faded, but still warm to the touch. He wondered about its significance, about the ancient markings in the cave, about the legend of the guardian bears. It all seemed too fantastical, and yet here he was, in the midst of it all. The sound of a helicopter broke through the night. Its searchlight swept across the burning forest, a beacon of hope in the darkness. Lucas waved frantically, and the light found them, illuminating their small refuge. The mother bear growled softly, uneasy at the loud, unfamiliar noise, but she didn't flee. As the helicopter lowered a rescue basket, Lucas faced a dilemma. He knew he had to go. It was his chance to get help, to save the forest and the bears. But leaving them felt wrong, like abandoning family. The mother bear nudged him gently, her eyes meeting his. In that moment, Lucas understood. This was part of his role as a guardian. He had to go, to be their voice, to ensure their protection. With a heavy heart, Lucas climbed into the basket, clutching the carved stone tightly. As he was lifted into the air, he watched the bears grow smaller, two dark shapes against the burning landscape. He silently vowed to return, to do whatever it took to save their home. The next few days passed in a blur of debriefings, medical checks, and frantic planning. Lucas worked tirelessly with firefighters, forest rangers, and wildlife experts, using his knowledge of the terrain and the bears' movements to guide their efforts. The carved stone never left his possession, a constant reminder of his mission. Elena joined him, bringing her expertise and connections to bear. Together, they coordinated a massive effort to contain the fire and protect the wildlife. As news of the guardian bears spread, volunteers poured in from surrounding communities, eager to help. The fire raged for a week, consuming acres of forest. But thanks to the combined efforts of firefighters, volunteers, and an unexpected rainstorm, it was finally brought under control. As the smoke cleared, Lucas returned to the forest, his heart heavy with anticipation and fear of what he might find. The landscape was transformed. Where once stood towering trees and lush undergrowth, now lay a carpet of ash and blackened stumps. But as Lucas walked deeper into the forest, he began to see signs of hope. Green shoots poked through the ash, resilient ferns unfurled their fronds, and the sound of birdsong gradually returned. He made his way to the rock formation, where he had last seen the bears, the carved stone growing warm in his pocket as he approached. At the base of the rocks he found fresh tracks, large paw prints leading away into a part of the forest that had been spared the worst of the fire. Following the tracks, Lucas entered a small valley he had never seen before. The air was cooler here, the vegetation lush and untouched by the fire. A clear stream ran through the center, and at its bank stood the mother bear and her cub, alive and unharmed. Lucas approached slowly, overcome with emotion. The mother bear turned to him, and in her eyes he saw recognition and something more, a shared understanding of what they had endured together. The cub bounded over playfully, nuzzling against Lucas's leg. As Lucas knelt to greet the cub, the carved stone slipped from his pocket. It landed on the soft earth, and to Lucas's amazement, it began to glow brightly. The light spread, seeping into the ground like water. Where it touched, plants seemed to grow more vibrantly, and the very air hummed with energy. Lucas watched in awe as the stone's power flowed outward, rejuvenating the scorched earth beyond the valley. New growth sprouted at an accelerated pace, and animals emerged from hiding, drawn to the revitalized land. In that moment, Lucas understood the true meaning of being a guardian. It wasn't just about protecting the forest from external threats. It was about nurturing it, helping it heal and grow. The bears, the stone, the ancient cave paintings, they were all part of a greater cycle of renewal and balance. With this newfound understanding, Lucas committed himself fully to his role. In the months and years that followed, he worked tirelessly to restore the forest. The valley became a sanctuary, protected by law thanks to Elena's efforts and the undeniable evidence of its ecological importance. Lucas continued to walk with the bears, learning from them and sharing his knowledge with others. He established an education center at the edge of the forest, where people could learn about the delicate balance of nature and the importance of preservation. The legend of the guardian bears grew, attracting environmentalists, researchers, and nature lovers from around the world. But Lucas remained true to his original mission, to protect the forest and its inhabitants, to maintain the ancient bond between humans and nature. And on quiet evenings, as the sun set over the restored forest, Lucas would sit with the mother, bear and her growing cub, the carved stone warm in his hands, and feel the pulse of the land, a reminder of the fire they had faced together and the new life that had risen from the ashes. Lucas remained on edge in the days following the fire, the forest quieter than usual. Its silence carried an unease, But the carved stone, now back in his pocket, no longer glowed, yet it seemed heavier than before. Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that the forest wasn't done with him yet. One morning, as Lucas stepped outside his cabin, he found the mother bear waiting nearby. She held something unusual in her mouth, a plant with vivid golden leaves and delicate white blossoms. She placed it gently on the ground, nudging it toward him before retreating into the shadows with her cub. Lucas examined the plant carefully, noting its unique features. Unsure of its significance, he brought it to Dr. Elena Blackwood, who immediately recognized it. Her face lit with a mixture of astonishment and urgency, as she explained that the plant resembled one from old folklore, believed to hold medicinal properties capable of curing diseases no modern medicine could treat. If confirmed, it could save countless lives. Elena and Lucas began researching the plant, consulting biologists and herbalists. Their findings revealed its potential as a cure for a rare but deadly illness affecting local wildlife and possibly humans. News of the discovery spread quickly, drawing attention from conservationists and, unfortunately, from those who would exploit such a resource. As word got out, the forest faced a new threat. Unscrupulous pharmaceutical companies caught wind of the discovery, sending teams to scour the area for the rare plant. Their methods were invasive and destructive, with little regard for the delicate ecosystem they were disrupting. Lucas found himself in a race against time. He needed to protect the plant and unlock its secrets before it could be exploited or destroyed. Working tirelessly with Eleanor and a team of trusted researchers, he set up a makeshift lab in his cabin. They worked around the clock, analyzing the plant's properties and trying to synthesize its healing compounds. The mother bear and her cub became more frequent visitors, often bringing more specimens of the golden-leaved plant. It was as if they understood the urgency of the situation and were actively helping in their own way. Lucas marveled at their intelligence and the depth of their connection to the forest's secrets. As their research progressed, Lucas and Elena made a startling discovery. The plant's potency was directly linked to the health of the surrounding ecosystem. Samples taken from areas untouched by the fire or human interference were far more effective than those from disturbed regions. This revelation highlighted the critical importance of preserving the forest in its natural state. However, their work didn't go unnoticed. One night, as Lucas was recording his latest findings, he heard a commotion outside. Peering through the window, he saw a group of men in dark clothing, armed with tranquilizer guns and capture equipment. They were clearly after the bears. Without hesitation, Lucas grabbed the carved stone and rushed out into the darkness. He could hear the mother bear's warning growls in the distance. Using his intimate knowledge of the forest, he navigated through the underbrush, determined to reach the bears before the poachers did. As he ran, the stone in his pocket began to warm, its glow intensifying with each step. Lucas felt a surge of energy coursing through him, heightening his senses. He could suddenly perceive the forest in a way he never had before. Every rustle of leaves, every subtle scent, every hidden path became clear to him. He found the bears, cornered in a small clearing, the poachers closing in. The mother bear stood protectively over her cub, her eyes fierce in the moonlight. Lucas stepped into the clearing, the glowing stone held high. Its light pulsed, sending out waves of energy. That seemed to resonate with the very trees around them. To everyone's astonishment, the forest itself began to respond. Vines whipped out, entangling the poachers' feet. Branches swayed and dipped, obscuring their vision. Even the ground seemed to shift, making it impossible for the intruders to keep their footing. In the chaos, the bears slipped away, with Lucas following close behind. As they retreated deeper into the forest, Lucas realized the true power of the stone and his role as a guardian. He wasn't just protecting the bears or the rare plant. He was a conduit for the forest's own defense mechanisms, awakened by the bond he had formed with its creatures and the land itself. The incident with the poachers made it clear that more comprehensive protection was needed. Lucas and Elena redoubled their efforts, not just in their research, but in advocating for the forest's preservation. They reached out to environmental organizations, government agencies, and the media, sharing their discoveries about the rare plant and its connection to the ecosystem's health. Their message resonated with people around the world. The story of the healing plant, the guardian bears and the ancient forest captured the public's imagination. Donations poured in, allowing them to establish a state-of-the-art research facility on the edge of the forest. More importantly, it led to the creation of a large protected area, ensuring that the forest and its inhabitants would remain undisturbed. As their work progressed, Lucas and Elena made more groundbreaking discoveries. They found that the golden-leaved plant was just one of many species in the forest with extraordinary properties. Each discovery reinforced the importance of biodiversity and the intricate relationships between different species in the ecosystem. These, Mother Bear and her cub, remained constant presences in Lucas's life. They seemed to take on the role of guides, leading him to new areas of the forest where rare plants grew or where the ecosystem was under stress and needed attention. Lucas marveled at their intelligence and the depth of their connection to the forest's rhythms. One day, as Lucas was collecting samples near a secluded stream, he noticed the cub behaving strangely. It pawed at the ground insistently, then looked up at Lucas with what he could only describe as urgency in its eyes. Intrigued, Lucas began to dig where the cub had indicated. A few feet down, he uncovered something extraordinary. Fossilized. Remains of an ancient plant, bearing a striking resemblance to the golden-leaved species they had been studying. This discovery opened up a new avenue of research. With Elena's expertise in anthropology and the help of paleobotanists, they began to piece together the evolutionary history of the healing plant. They found evidence that it had existed in the region for millions of years, adapting and evolving alongside the other species in the forest. The fossilized find also contained traces of human activity, stone tools and remnants of early settlements. It became clear that the ancient inhabitants of the area had known about the plant's healing properties and had lived in harmony with the forest, much like Lucas was learning to do now. As their understanding deepened, so did the challenges they faced. Climate change began to impact the forest in noticeable ways. Seasons shifted, affecting the blooming cycles of the golden-leaved plant and other species. Extreme weather events became more frequent, threatening the delicate balance of the ecosystem. Lucas found himself not just protecting the forest from immediate human threats, but also working to mitigate the long-term effects of global environmental changes. He collaborated with climate scientists, using the forest as a living laboratory to study resilience and adaptation in natural systems. Throughout all of this, the carved stone remained a constant presence, its powers growing alongside Lucas's connection to the forest. He learned to use it not just for protection, but as a tool for healing and rejuvenation. With the stone's help, he could accelerate the growth of damaged areas, guide lost animals back to safety, and even calm the violent winds of approaching storms. Years passed and the forest thrived under Lucas's guardianship. The research facility became a globally recognized center for ecological and medical studies. The healing properties of the golden-leaved plant led to breakthroughs in treating several previously incurable diseases, all while ensuring sustainable harvesting practices that didn't harm the forest. Lucas, now older but still vibrant, spent his days wandering the forest paths, often accompanied by the mother bear, now elderly herself, and her grown cub, who had cubs of its own. He marveled at the cycles of life he had witnessed, the challenges they had overcome, and the profound connections he had formed. One crisp autumn morning, much like the day he had first encountered the bear cub so many years ago, Lucas felt a familiar pull. The carved stone in his pocket hummed with energy, guiding him deep into the heart of the forest. There, in a sun-dappled clearing, he found a sight that took his breath away. A new generation of guardian bears had emerged. Young cubs, their eyes bright with intelligence and curiosity, gathered around a circle of the golden-leaved plants. The plants seemed to glow with an inner light, their leaves shimmering in hues he had never seen before. As Lucas watched, he understood that this was more than just a natural phenomenon. It was a sign of renewal, a promise that the forest and its guardians would continue long after he was gone. He had played his part in an ancient cycle, preserving the wisdom of the past while paving the way for the future. With a sense of profound peace, Lucas sat down among the bears and the glowing plants. He felt the pulse of the forest all around. Him, a living, breathing entity of which he was now an integral part. The carved stone in his hand beat in rhythm with his heart and the very earth beneath him. As the sun began to set, casting the clearing in a golden light, Lucas smiled. He knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, the forest would endure. The legacy of the guardian bears, the healing plants and the ancient wisdom they protected would continue, a timeless dance of life, magic, and nature's enduring spirit. "Thy," Forrest hummed with quiet gratitude as Lucas walked away, confident that the cycle would continue for generations to come. From being a photographer to becoming an advocate for wildlife security, this was a story Lucas would never forget and would continue to spread throughout his remaining days. As the years passed, Lucas's connection to the forest and its inhabitants only deepened. His cabin, once a simple shelter on the edge of the wilderness, had transformed into a hub of conservation activity. Researchers, environmentalists, and curious visitors from around the world sought him out, eager to learn about the guardian bears and the miraculous healing plants. Lucas, now in his 60s with streaks of grey in his beard, still spent most of his days wandering the forest paths. The mother bear who had first led him on this journey was elderly now, her movements slower, but her eyes still sharp with intelligence. Her cub, now fully grown, had cubs of its own, continuing the lineage of forest guardians. One crisp autumn morning, much like the day he had first rescued the bear cub decades ago, Lucas set out on a familiar trail. The carved stone in his pocket hummed with a gentle warmth, a constant reminder of the bond he shared with this land. As he walked, he reflected on the incredible journey that had brought him here. The research facility they had established on the edge of the forest had grown into a world-renowned center for ecological studies and conservation. Scientists from every continent collaborated there, studying the unique properties of the forest's flora and fauna. The golden-leaved plant, which had started it all, had indeed led to breakthroughs in medicine, with treatments derived from it saving countless lives. But more than the scientific achievements, Lucas was proud of the change in perspective they had fostered. People who came to the forest left with a profound understanding of the interconnectedness of all living things. Children who grew up hearing the stories of the guardian bears became passionate defenders of nature in their own right. As Lucas reached a familiar clearing, he saw a group of young bears playing near a stand of the golden-leaved plants. Their mother watched from nearby, her posture relaxed but alert. Lucas smiled, remembering the early days when such a sight would have filled him with anxiety. Now it was a reassuring scene of life continuing its natural cycles. He sat down on a fallen log, his joints creaking slightly with age. The young bears, curious but cautious, watched him with intelligent eyes. Lucas reached into his pocket and pulled out the carved stone. Its surface was worn smooth from years of handling, but the etching of the bear and human figures was still clear. As he held the stone, its glow intensified, pulsing in rhythm with the forest around him. The young bears approached, drawn by the stone's energy. Lucas felt a familiar surge of connection, a heightening of his senses that allowed him to perceive the forest on a deeper level. Through this enhanced awareness, Lucas could feel the health of the ecosystem all around him. He sensed the mycelial networks beneath the soil, carrying nutrients and information between plants. He perceived the subtle shifts in air currents that signaled changing weather patterns, and he felt the presence of countless animals, from the tiniest insects to the largest predators, all playing their part in the forest's grand symphony. But with this deep connection came an awareness of the challenges still facing the forest. Climate change was altering weather patterns, stressing some species and allowing others to encroach. The protected status of the forest kept direct human interference at bay, but the effects of global environmental changes were impossible to completely shield against. Lucas and his team had been working tirelessly to help the forest adapt. They had implemented careful interventions, guided by the wisdom of the guardian bears and the power of the carved stone. Corridors were established to allow species to migrate as needed. Certain areas were given extra protection to serve as refuges for the most vulnerable plants and animals. As he sat in the clearing, Lucas felt a familiar presence approach. The elderly mother bear, her fur now grizzled with age, ambled into view. She moved slowly but with purpose, coming to rest beside Lucas. They sat in companionable silence, two old friends who had seen so much change together. Suddenly, the carved stone in Lucas's hand pulsed with unprecedented energy. The mother bear's ears perked up, and she turned her gaze to the forest's depths. Lucas stood, his senses on high alert. Something was happening deep in the heart of the woods. With a shared look of understanding, Lucas and the mother bear set off together. Despite their age, they moved with determination, guided by the stone's insistent pull. As they traveled deeper into the forest, Lucas noticed subtle changes in the environment. The plants seemed more vibrant, the air charged with an almost electric energy. After what felt like hours of walking, they emerged into a hidden valley Lucas had never seen before. The sight that greeted them was breathtaking. A grove of ancient trees, their trunks wider than any Lucas had ever seen, formed a natural cathedral. In the center of the grove stood a massive stone monolith, covered in carvings similar to those in the cave he had discovered years ago. As they approached the monolith, Lucas saw that it was surrounded by a circle of the golden-leaved plants. But these were unlike any he had seen before. They seemed to glow from within, their leaves shimmering with colors that defied description. The carved stone in Lucas's hand grew almost too hot to hold. Acting on instinct, he approached the monolith and placed the stone in a small recess that seemed made for it. As soon as the stone touched the monolith, a wave of energy pulsed outward, rippling through the forest. Lucas gasped as visions flooded his mind. He saw the forest as it had been thousands of years ago, watched it change and grow over centuries. He saw generations of guardian bears, each playing their role in protecting and nurturing the land. And he saw glimpses of the future, challenges to come, but also the resilience and adaptability of the forest and its inhabitants. When the visions faded, Lucas found himself on his knees, the mother bear standing protectively over him. As he looked up, he saw that they were no longer alone. Bears of all ages had gathered in the grove, their eyes fixed on the monolith. Among them, Lucas recognized faces he had known over the years, descendants of the cub he had rescued so long ago. That moment, Lucas understood that he had been part of something far greater than he had ever imagined. The role of guardian wasn't limited to the bears, or even to himself. It was a sacred trust, passed down through generations of all species, each playing their part in maintaining the delicate balance of nature. As the sun began to set, casting the grove in a golden light, Lucas felt a profound sense of peace wash over him. He knew that his time as the human guardian was drawing to a close, but he wasn't afraid. He had played his part, and now it was time to pass the torch to the next generation. In the days that followed, Lucas worked with renewed purpose. He gathered his research team, his conservationist colleagues, and the local community. He shared with them the vision he had experienced, instilling in them a deeper understanding of their connection to the forest and their responsibility to protect it. Lucas spent time with aspiring young naturalists, sharing his knowledge and encouraging their curiosity. He worked with legal experts to strengthen the protections for the forest, ensuring that it would remain a sanctuary for generations to come. And he continued to walk the forest paths with the bears, deepening the bond between humans and nature. As winter approached, Lucas felt a change coming. The carved stone, which had been his constant companion for so many years, began to fade. Its glow dimmed, and its warmth cooled. Lucas understood that its purpose, like his own, had been fulfilled. On a quiet, snowy evening, Lucas took one last walk into the heart of the forest. The mother bear, now very old, accompanied him. They made their way to the hidden grove with the monolith. There, surrounded by the ancient trees and the shimmering golden-leaved plants, Lucas placed the carved stone back into the recess on the monolith. As the stone settled into place, Lucas felt the weight of years lift from his shoulders. He saw a vision of the forest's future, vibrant, resilient, and full of life. He saw new guardians, both human and animal, rising to meet the challenges ahead. And he saw that the story of the guardian bears would live on, inspiring generations to come. With a peaceful smile, Lucas sat down at the base of the monolith, the mother bear curled up beside him. As snowflakes began to fall, glittering like stars in the fading light, Lucas closed his eyes. He listened to the heartbeat of the forest, feeling more connected to it than ever before. And so the photographer who had stumbled upon a bear cub in danger so many years ago completed his journey. Lucas had become more than just a guardian of the forest. He had become a part of its living legacy, a chapter in an ancient and ongoing story of harmony between humans and nature. As night fell, the forest seemed to hold its breath in quiet reverence. The tale of Lucas and the guardian bears had come full circle, but the greater story, the eternal dance of life, protection, and renewal in the heart of the wilderness, would continue on, unending and ever-changing, for ages to come. The legacy of Lucas and the guardian bears continued to ripple outward, touching lives far beyond the boundaries of the forest. As news of his passing spread, people from all walks of life were drawn to the story of the photographer who had become a protector of the wilderness. Emma Chen, a young environmental science student, had grown up hearing tales of Lucas and the miraculous forest. Now, standing at the edge of the protected area, she felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. She had come here as part of a research team, hoping to continue the work Lucas had started decades ago. The forest that greeted Emma was a far cry from the threatened wilderness of Lucas's early days. Towering trees created a canopy that filtered the sunlight, casting dappled shadows on the lush undergrowth. The air was rich with the scent of pine and wildflowers, and the sound of birdsong filled the air. As Emma and her team set up their base camp, they were acutely aware of the weight of responsibility on their shoulders. They were not just scientists here to study an ecosystem. They were the next generation of guardians, tasked with preserving the delicate balance Lucas had fought so hard to protect. Their first few days were spent getting acquainted with the forest. They set up monitoring stations, collected samples, and began the painstaking process of cataloging the incredible biodiversity around them. Emma found herself constantly in awe of the intricate relationships between species, each playing a vital role in the health of the ecosystem. It was on their 5th day that Emma had her first encounter with the bears. She was collecting soil, samples near a stream, when she heard a rustle in the underbrush. Looking up, she found herself face to face with a large bear, its intelligent eyes regarding her with curiosity rather than aggression. Emma's heart raced, but she remembered the stories of Lucas and forced herself to remain calm. The bear sniffed the air, then slowly approached. To Emma's amazement, it gently nudged her hand, as if encouraging her to follow. Without fully understanding why, Emma found herself walking deeper into the forest, guided by this magnificent creature. The bear led her to a small clearing where several of the famed golden-leaved plants grew. Emma gasped at their beauty, their leaves shimmering with an almost otherworldly light. As she knelt to examine them more closely, she felt a strange warmth in her pocket. Reaching in, she pulled out a small stone she had found near the camp. Earlier that week, to her astonishment, it was glowing faintly, pulsing in rhythm with the plants before her. In that moment, Emma understood that she had been chosen, just as Lucas had been all those years ago. The forest was reaching out to her, inviting her to become part of its ancient cycle of guardianship. With trembling hands, she carefully collected a sample of the plant, knowing that this discovery would be crucial to their research. As the weeks passed, Emma and her team made breakthrough after breakthrough. They found that the healing properties of the golden-leaved plant had evolved, adapting to combat new diseases that had emerged in recent years. They discovered new species of insects and fungi that played crucial roles in maintaining the forest's health. And they began to unravel the complex communication networks that connected every living thing in the ecosystem. But their work was not without challenges. Climate change had taken its toll, altering weather patterns and putting stress on certain species. Emma and her team worked tirelessly to develop strategies to help the forest adapt, always guided by the wisdom of the bears and the energy of the carved stone Emma now carried with her. One stormy night, as wind and rain lashed at their camp, Emma was awakened by an urgent feeling. The stone in her pocket was pulsing rapidly, and she could hear distressed animal calls over the howling wind. Without hesitation, she donned her rain gear and ventured out into the tempest. Guided by the stone and her own intuition, Emma made her way to a part of the forest she had never seen before. There, in a ravine rapidly filling with water, she found a group of young animals. bear cubs, wolf pups, and even a young deer, trapped and in danger of drowning. Emma knew she couldn't rescue them alone, but she also knew she couldn't leave them. Closing her eyes, she clutched the stone and focused all her energy on calling for help. To her amazement, she felt a response, a surge of power that seemed to flow from the very earth beneath her feet. Moments later, adult bears emerged from the forest, followed by wolves and deer. Working together in a way Emma had never thought possible, the animals and Emma managed to rescue the young ones from the rising waters. As the storm began to subside, Emma found herself surrounded by a group of creatures that should have been natural enemies, all coexisting peacefully in this moment of crisis. This experience solidified Emma's commitment to the forest and its inhabitants. She understood now that her role as a guardian went beyond scientific research. She was a bridge between worlds, helping to maintain the delicate balance between human knowledge and natural wisdom. As the years passed, Emma became known as a leading expert in forest ecology and conservation. She wrote books, gave lectures, and advised governments on environmental policy. But she never forgot that her true calling was to the forest itself. Emma established an education center at the edge of the protected area, where people from all over the world could come to learn about the importance of preserving natural habitats. She developed programs that allowed visitors to experience the magic of the forest firsthand, always under the watchful eyes of the guardian bears. 1RV. Emma's most significant contributions was the creation of a global network of protected forests. Inspired by the success of Lucas's sanctuary, she worked with international organizations to identify and protect crucial ecosystems around the world. Each of these areas was managed using the principles she had learned in her forest, respecting the wisdom of local species, maintaining biodiversity, and fostering a deep connection between humans and nature. As Emma entered her later years, she began to think about the future of the forest and its guardians. She had mentored many young scientists and conservationists over the decades, but she knew that the choice of the next guardian was not hers to make. Just as the forest had chosen Lucas and then her, it would choose its next protector when the time was right. On the 20th anniversary of Lucas's passing, Emma organized a special gathering in the heart of the forest. Conservationists, scientists, and nature lovers from around the world came to pay tribute to the legacy of the guardian bears and to renew their commitment to protecting the natural world. As twilight fell, Emma led the group to the hidden grove with the ancient monolith. The golden-leaved plants shimmered in the fading light, their glow seemingly brighter than ever. Emma stepped forward, the carved stone warm in her hand, and began to speak. She told the assembled crowd about Lucas, about the bears, and about the countless other creatures that had played a role in protecting this sacred place. She spoke of the challenges they had faced and overcome, and of the battles yet to be fought. But most of all, she spoke of hope. Hope for a future where humans and nature existed in harmony, each supporting and enriching the other. As Emma's words echoed through the grove, something remarkable happened. The monolith began to glow, pulsing, with the same energy Emma had felt in the stone all these years. The assembled crowd watched in awe as images appeared in the air around them, visions of the forest's past, present, and possible futures. They saw the first guardian bears, ancient and wise. They saw Lucas, young and determined, rescuing the bear cub that would change his life. They saw Emma guided by the bear to her destiny, and they saw glimpses of what was to come, challenges and triumphs, setbacks and victories in the ongoing struggle to protect the natural world. As the visions faded, Emma felt a profound sense of peace wash over her. She knew that her time as the human guardian was drawing to a close, but she wasn't afraid. She had played her part in this ancient cycle, and now it was time for the next generation to step forward. Looking out over the crowd, Emma saw faces filled with wonder, determination, and love for this remarkable place. She knew that among them was the next guardian, though she couldn't say who it might be. The forest would choose, as it always had. As the gathering came to an end and people began to disperse, Emma remained in the grove. She sat at the base of the monolith, the carved stone cradled in her hands. Around her, the forest hummed with life, the rustle of leaves, the chirp of insects, the distant call of a wolf. A movement caught her eye, and Emma smiled as she saw a bear emerge from the shadows. It was an old bear, its muzzle grayed with age, but its eyes were bright with intelligence and kindness. Emma recognized it as a descendant of the cub Lucas had rescued so long ago. The bear ambled over and settled down beside her, its warm bulk a comforting presence in the growing darkness. Together, woman and bear sat in companionable silence, guardians of a legacy that stretched back through time immemorial. As the first stars appeared in the sky above, Emma closed her eyes and listened to the heartbeat of the forest. She felt profoundly grateful for the journey that had brought her here, for the wisdom she had gained, and for the hope that burned bright for the future. The story of the guardian bears would continue, she knew. It would be told around campfires and in classrooms, passed down through generations, inspiring countless others to take up the mantle of protecting the natural world. And here, in this forest that had seen so much, the ancient cycle of life, death, and renewal would go on, a testament to the enduring power of nature and the unbreakable bond between all living things. The legacy of Lucas and Emma, the human, guardians who had dedicated their lives to protecting the forest and its inhabitants, continued to inspire new generations. As the years passed, the story of the guardian bears and the miraculous healing plants became intertwined with the growing global movement for environmental conservation. Zoe Martinez, a brilliant young botanist with a passion for endangered species, found herself drawn to the legendary forest. She had grown up hearing tales of Lucas's bravery and Emma's wisdom, and now she yearned to see this remarkable ecosystem for herself. With a research grant and a heart full of determination, Zoe set out for the protected area that had become a beacon of hope in a world increasingly threatened by climate change and habitat destruction. As Zoe stepped into the forest for the first time, she was overwhelmed by its beauty and vitality. The canopy above was a tapestry of greens, filtering sunlight into dappled patterns on the forest floor. The air was rich with the scent of earth and growing things, and everywhere she looked, life thrummed with quiet intensity. Setting up her research station at the edge of a clearing, Zoe began the painstaking work of cataloging the forest's incredible biodiversity. She was particularly interested in the golden-leaved plant that had been at the heart of so many stories. Despite decades of study, the plant still held many mysteries, and Zoe was determined to uncover them. Days turned into weeks as Zoe immersed herself in her research. She collected samples, ran tests, and spent long hours observing the intricate relationships between the various species that called the forest home. But for all her scientific rigor, Zoe couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to this place, something that couldn't be captured in data points or chemical analyses. It was on a misty morning, as Zoe was examining a particularly vibrant specimen of the golden-leaved plant, that she had her first extraordinary encounter. A rustling in the underbrush caught her attention, and she looked up to see a bear cub watching her curiously. Zoe's heart raced, but she remained still, remembering the tales of the guardian bears. The cub approached cautiously, its nose twitching as it sniffed the air. To Zoe's amazement, it gently nudged her hand, as if encouraging her to follow. Without fully understanding why, Zoe found herself walking deeper into the forest, guided by this young creature. The cub led her to a hidden grove she had never seen before. There, surrounded by ancient trees, stood a stone monolith covered in strange markings. At its base grew a cluster of golden-leaved plants unlike any Zoe had ever seen. They seemed to pulse with an inner light, their leaves shimmering with colors that defied description. As Zoe knelt to examine the plants, she felt a strange warmth in her pocket. Reaching in, she pulled out a small stone she had found near her camp earlier that week. To her astonishment, it was glowing faintly, pulsing in rhythm with the plants before her. In that moment, Zoe understood that she had been chosen, just as Lucas and Emma had been before her. The forest was reaching out, inviting her to become part of its ancient cycle of guardianship. With trembling hands, she carefully collected a sample of the plant, knowing that this discovery would be crucial to her research and to the future of the forest. Returning to her camp, Zoe threw herself into analyzing the new samples. What she found astounded her. The plants from the hidden grove showed remarkable adaptability, their cellular structure shifting in response to environmental stresses. It was as if they could predict and prepare for changes in their ecosystem. Excited by her findings, Zoe expanded her research. She began to study not just the golden-leaved plant, but the entire network of life in the forest. She discovered that the plants were part of a vast mycelial network, connecting trees, shrubs, and even animals, in a complex web of communication and resource sharing. As her understanding deepened, Zoe realized that the forest was far more than just a collection of individual species. It was a superorganism, each part working in harmony with the others to maintain balance and resilience. And at the heart of it all were the guardian bears, their ancient wisdom somehow encoded in the very DNA of the forest. Zoe's research took on new urgency as she began to understand the implications of her discoveries. The adaptability she had observed in the golden-leaved plant could hold the key to helping ecosystems around the world cope with the impacts of climate change. The communication networks she had mapped could revolutionize our understanding of forest ecology and inform more effective conservation strategies. But as Zoe delved deeper into her work, she also became aware of a growing threat. News of her groundbreaking research had spread, attracting attention not just from the scientific community, but from pharmaceutical companies and biotechnology firms. Many saw the potential for profit in the forest's secrets, and Zoe knew that if they had their way, the delicate balance of the ecosystem could be destroyed. Determined to protect the forest and its inhabitants, Zoe reached out to Emma, now elderly but still a powerful advocate for conservation. Together, they began to develop a plan to safeguard the forest's secrets, while still allowing for responsible scientific study. They established a network of researchers committed to ethical practices and conservation. They worked with government agencies to strengthen protections for the forest and its inhabitants. And they launched a global education campaign, sharing the story of the guardian bears and the importance of preserving intact ecosystems. As their efforts gained momentum, Zoe found herself spending more and more time in the forest. She began to form bonds with the bears, learning to read their subtle signals and understand their role in maintaining the health of the ecosystem. The carved stone she had found became a constant companion, its soft glow a reminder of her connection to this extraordinary place. One night, as Zoe sat by her campfire reviewing her notes, she heard a commotion in the forest. Grabbing her flashlight, she ventured out to investigate. What she found filled her with horror. A group of poachers had entered the protected area, their sights set on capturing bear cubs for the illegal wildlife trade. Without thinking, Zoe rushed to intervene. But as she confronted the poachers, she realized she was outnumbered and in grave danger. Just as the situation seemed most dire, a loud roar echoed through the trees. The guardian bears emerged from the darkness, their presence majestic and terrifying. What happened next was something Zoe would never forget. The bears didn't attack the poachers, but rather formed a protective circle around them and Zoe. The forest itself seemed to come alive, branches swaying and roots shifting to create an impenetrable barrier. Trapped and frightened, the poachers were forced to confront the consequences of their actions. Zoe, her heart pounding, found herself speaking to them, sharing the story of the forest and its guardians. As dawn broke, the poachers laid down their weapons, overcome by the power and beauty of what they had witnessed. This incident marked a turning point. Word of the guardian bear's intervention spread, and the forest's reputation as a sacred, protected place grew. Zoe's research, combined with the undeniable evidence of the forest's unique properties, led to increased funding for conservation, efforts and stricter penalties for those who would exploit the land. As the years passed, Zoe's role evolved. She became not just a scientist, but a teacher and storyteller, sharing the wisdom of the forest with a new generation of conservationists. She established a research center at the edge of the protected area, where scientists from around the world could come to study the forest's remarkable ecosystem. But even as her professional accomplishments grew, Zoe never forgot that her true calling was to the forest itself. She spent long hours walking the quiet paths, communing with the bears, and listening to the ancient rhythms of the land. The carved stone, now worn smooth from years of handling, remained her constant companion, a tangible link to the forest's deep magic. As Zoe entered her later years, she began to think about the future of the forest and its guardians. She had mentored many young scientists and conservationists, but she knew that the choice of the next guardian was not hers to make. Just as the forest had chosen Lucas, then Emma, and then her, it would choose its next protector when the time was right. On the anniversary of her first arrival in the forest, Zoe organized a gathering in the hidden grove with the stone monolith. Conservationists, scientists, and nature lovers from around the world came to pay tribute to the legacy of the guardian bears and to renew their commitment to protecting the natural world. As twilight fell, Zoe stepped forward, the carved stone warm in her hand, and began to speak. She told the assembled crowd about Lucas and Emma, about the bears, and about the countless other creatures that had played a role in protecting this sacred place. She spoke of the challenges they had faced and overcome, and of the battles yet to be fought. But most of all, she spoke of hope for a future where humans and nature existed in harmony, each supporting and enriching the other. As Zoe's words echoed through the grove, the monolith began to glow, pulsing with energy. The assembled crowd watched in awe as images appeared in the air around them, visions of the forest's past, present, and possible futures. As the visions faded, Zoe felt a profound sense of peace wash over her. She knew that her time as the human guardian was drawing to a close, but she wasn't afraid. She had played her part in this ancient cycle, and now it was time for the next generation to step forward. Looking out over the crowd, Zoe saw faces filled with wonder, determination, and love for this remarkable place. She knew that among them was the next guardian, though she couldn't say who it might be. The forest would choose, as it always had. As the gathering dispersed, Zoe remained in the grove, sitting at the base of the monolith with the carved stone cradled in her hands. A bear emerged from the shadows, a descendant of the guardians that had watched over the forest for generations. It settled beside her, a comforting presence in the growing darkness. Together, woman and bear sat in companionable silence. Guardians of a legacy that stretched back through time immemorial. As the first stars appeared in the sky above, Zoe closed her eyes and listened to the heartbeat of the forest. She felt profoundly grateful for the journey that had brought her here, for the wisdom she had gained, and for the hope that burned bright for the future. The story of the guardian bears would continue, she knew. It would be told around campfires and in classrooms, passed down through generations, inspiring countless others to take up the mantle of protecting the natural world. And here, in this forest that had seen so much, the ancient cycle of life, death, and renewal would go on, a testament to the enduring power of nature and the unbreakable bond between all living things. As the years passed, the legend of the guardian bears and the miraculous forest spread far beyond the boundaries of the protected area. What had once been a local tale of conservation had become a global symbol of hope in the face of environmental crisis. The story of Lucas, Emma, and Zoe, the human guardians who had dedicated their lives to protecting this extraordinary ecosystem, inspired a new generation of conservationists and scientists. Among them was Aiden Nakamura, a brilliant young ecologist with a passion for using technology to support conservation efforts. Aiden had grown up hearing stories of the forest and its guardians, and had dedicated his career to developing new ways of monitoring and protecting endangered ecosystems around the world. When Aiden received an invitation to visit the legendary forest and collaborate with the research team there, he felt as though his life's work had been leading to this moment. With a mix of excitement and trepidation, he packed his gear, including his latest AI-powered drones and sensor arrays, and set off for the protected area. As Aiden stepped into the forest for the first time, he was struck by an overwhelming sense of awe. The canopy above was a living tapestry of greens and golds, filtering sunlight into ever-shifting patterns on the forest floor. The air was thick with the scent of earth and growing things, and everywhere he looked, life thrummed with quiet intensity. Setting up his equipment at the research station, Aiden began the process of integrating his technology with the ongoing studies of the forest's ecosystem. His drones, equipped with advanced cameras and sensors, could map the forest in unprecedented detail, tracking the health of individual trees and monitoring animal populations without disturbing them. But as the days passed, Aidan began to realize that there was something about this forest that defied his technological approach. The data he collected was fascinating, but it failed to capture the true essence of the place, the sense of ancient wisdom and interconnectedness that seemed to permeate every leaf and stone. It was on a misty morning, as Aidan was calibrating one of his sensor arrays, that he had his first extraordinary encounter. A rustling in the underbrush caught his attention, and he looked up to see a bear watching him curiously. Aidan's heart raced, but he remained still, remembering the tales of the guardian bears. The bear approached cautiously, its nose twitching as it sniffed the air. To Aidan's amazement, it gently nudged his hand, as if encouraging him to follow. Without fully understanding why, Aidan found himself walking deeper into the forest, guided by this creature that should have been a fearsome predator, but instead felt like a wise companion. The bear led him to a hidden grove he had never seen before. There, surrounded by ancient trees, stood a stone monolith covered in strange markings. At its base grew a cluster of the famed golden-leaved plants, their leaves shimmering with an inner light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the forest around them. As Aidan knelt to examine the plants, he felt a strange warmth in his pocket. Reaching in, he pulled out a small stone he had found near the research station earlier that week. To his astonishment, it was glowing faintly, pulsing in sync with the plants before him. In that moment, Aidan understood that he had been chosen, just as Lucas, Emma, and Zoe had been before him. The forest was reaching out, inviting him to become part of its ancient cycle of guardianship. With trembling hands, he carefully collected a sample of the plant, knowing that this discovery would change everything. Returning to the research station, Aidan threw himself into analyzing the new samples. What he found astounded him. The plants from the hidden grove showed remarkable properties, their cellular structure capable of adapting to environmental stresses in ways he had never seen before. It was as if they could predict and prepare for changes in their ecosystem. Excited by his findings, Aidan expanded his research. He began to use his technology not just to observe the forest, but to communicate with it. He developed new algorithms that could interpret the subtle changes in the forest's rhythms, translating them into data that could be understood and acted upon. As his understanding deepened, Aidan realized that the forest was far more than just a collection of individual species. It was a vast interconnected network, each part working in harmony with the others to maintain balance and resilience. And at the heart of it all were the guardian bears, their ancient wisdom somehow encoded in the very fabric of the ecosystem. Aidan's work took on new urgency as he began to understand the implications of his discoveries. The adaptability he had observed in the golden-leaved plant could hold the key to helping ecosystems around the world cope with the impacts of climate change. The communication networks he had mapped could revolutionize our understanding of forest ecology and inform more effective conservation strategies. But as Aidan delved deeper into his work, he also became aware of a growing threat. The world outside, the protected area, was changing rapidly, with climate change and habitat destruction pushing many species to the brink of extinction. Aidan knew that the knowledge contained within this forest could be crucial to addressing these global challenges, but he also understood the risks of exposing its secrets to the outside world. Determined to find a balance between protection and progress, Aidan reached out to Zoe, now elderly but still a powerful advocate for the forest. Together, they began to develop a plan to share the forest's wisdom with the world, while still preserving its sanctity. They established a global network of researchers committed to ethical practices and conservation. They worked with tech companies to develop new tools for environmental monitoring and protection, inspired by the forest's natural systems. And they launched a virtual reality platform that allowed people from around the world to experience the magic of the forest and learn about its importance. As their efforts gained momentum, Aidan found himself spending more and more time in the forest. He began to form bonds with the bears, learning to read their subtle signals and understand their role in maintaining the health of the ecosystem. The carved stone he had found became a constant companion, its soft glow a reminder of his connection to this extraordinary place. One night, as Aidan sat by his computer reviewing data, he noticed an alarming pattern. His sensors were picking up signs of a rapidly approaching wildfire, driven by drought conditions and high winds. The fire was still miles away, but at its current rate of spread, it would reach the edge of the protected area by morning. Without hesitation, Aiden sprang into action. He alerted the local authorities and mobilized the research team. But as he watched the fire's progress on his monitors, he realized that human efforts alone might not be enough to save the forest. In that moment of crisis, Aiden felt the carved stone in his pocket grow warm. Acting on instinct, he raced into the forest, guided by some unseen force. He found himself in the hidden grove with the stone monolith, surrounded by guardian bears. As Aiden approached the monolith, the carved stone in his hand began to pulse with energy. He placed it in a small recess in the monolith, and suddenly the air was filled with a shimmering light. Aiden watched in awe as the energy spread through the forest, racing along roots and branches, connecting every living thing in a web of light. The forest itself seemed to come alive, responding to the threat as a single organism. Trees shifted their branches to create fire breaks, underground water sources surged to the surface, and animals moved in coordinated patterns to safety. Aiden's technology picked up these changes, translating the forest's actions into data that could guide the firefighting efforts. For days, the battle against the fire raged on. Aiden worked tirelessly, using his drones and sensors to direct resources where they were needed most. The guardian bears were constant presences, their strength and wisdom a source of comfort and inspiration. When the fire was finally extinguished, the forest had suffered losses, but its heart remained intact. The experience had demonstrated the power of combining ancient wisdom with modern technology, and it solidified Aiden's commitment to his role as a guardian. In the years that followed, Aiden's work transformed the field of conservation. He developed new technologies inspired by the forest's natural systems, creating tools that could help protect ecosystems around the world. He established a global network of protected areas, each one managed using the principles he had learned in the forest. But even as his influence grew, Aiden never forgot that his true calling was to the forest itself. He spent long hours walking the quiet paths, communing with the bears, and listening to the ancient rhythms of the land. The carved stone, now worn smooth from years of handling, remained his constant companion, a tangible link to the forest's deep magic. As Aiden entered his later years, he began to think about the future of the forest and its guardians. He had mentored many young scientists and conservationists, but he knew that the choice of the next guardian was not his to make. Just as the forest had chosen those before him, it would choose its next protector when the time was right. On the anniversary of his first arrival in the forest, Aiden organized a gathering in the hidden grove with the stone monolith. Conservationists, scientists, and nature lovers from around the world came to pay tribute to the legacy of the guardian. Bears and to renew their commitment to protecting the natural world. As twilight fell, Aiden stepped forward, the carved stone warm in his hand, and began to speak. He told the assembled crowd about Lucas, Emma, and Zoe, about the bears, and about the countless other creatures that had played a role in protecting this sacred place. He spoke of the challenges they had faced and overcome, and of the battles yet to be fought. But most of all, he spoke of hope for a future where humans and nature existed in harmony, each supporting and enriching the other. As Aiden's words echoed through the grove, the monolith began to glow, pulsing with energy. The assembled crowd watched in awe as images appeared in the air around them, visions of the forest's past, present, and possible futures. As the visions faded, Aiden felt a profound sense of peace wash over him. He knew that his time as the human guardian was drawing to a close, but he wasn't afraid. He had played his part in this ancient cycle, and now it was time for the next generation to step forward. Looking out over the crowd, Aiden saw faces filled with wonder, determination, and love for this remarkable place. He knew that among them was the next guardian, though he couldn't say who it might be. The forest would choose, as it always had. As the gathering dispersed, Aiden remained in the grove, sitting at the base of the monolith, with the carved stone cradled in his hands. A bear emerged from the shadows, a descendant of the guardians that had watched over the forest for generations. It settled beside him, a comforting presence in the growing darkness. Together, man and bear sat in companionable silence, guardians of a legacy that stretched back through time immemorial. As the first stars appeared in the sky above, Aidan closed his eyes and listened to the heartbeat of the forest. He felt profoundly grateful for the journey that had brought him here, for the wisdom he had gained, and for the hope that burned bright for the future. The story of the guardian bears would continue, he knew. It would be told around campfires, and in classrooms, passed down through generations, inspiring countless others to take up the mantle of protecting the natural world. And here in this forest that had seen so much, the ancient cycle of life, death, and renewal would go on, a testament to the enduring power of nature and the unbreakable bond between all living things. The legacy of the guardian bears and their human companions had become a beacon of hope in a world grappling with environmental crises. The story of Lucas, Emma, Zoe, and Aidan, the human guardians who had dedicated their lives to protecting the extraordinary forest, had spread far beyond the boundaries of the protected area, inspiring a global movement of conservation and reconnection with nature. As the years passed, the world outside the forest changed dramatically. Climate change had altered ecosystems across the globe, and humanity faced unprecedented challenges. Yet, the protected forest remained a bastion of resilience and adaptation, its secrets offering hope for a sustainable future. It was in this context that Lila Rodriguez, a promising young climate scientist with a background in indigenous wisdom, found herself drawn to the legendary forest. Lila had grown up in a small village in the Amazon, where her grandmother had taught her the importance of living in harmony with nature. Now armed with cutting-edge scientific knowledge and a deep respect for traditional ecological practices, Lila hoped to bridge the gap between modern science and ancient wisdom. When Lila received an invitation to join the research team at the protected forest, she felt as though her entire life had been leading to this moment. With a mix of excitement and reverence, she packed her belongings and set off for the place that had captured the world's imagination. As Lila stepped into the forest for the first time, she was overwhelmed by its vitality. The air hummed with life, and she could almost feel the pulse of the ecosystem beating in rhythm with her own heart. The canopy above was a tapestry of greens and golds, filtering sunlight into ever-shifting patterns on the forest floor. Setting up her workspace at the research station, Lila began to integrate her climate models with the ongoing studies of the forest's ecosystem. She was particularly interested in how the forest had managed to adapt to changing conditions over the years, hoping to find insights that could be applied to other threatened ecosystems around the world. As the days passed, Lila found herself spending more and more time in the forest itself, rather than at her computer. She began to notice subtle patterns and connections that her models couldn't capture. The way certain plants seemed to flourish in the company of others, the intricate dance of pollinators moving from flower to flower, the quiet wisdom in the eyes of the animals she encountered. It was on a misty morning, as Lila was collecting soil samples, that she had her first extraordinary encounter. A rustling in the underbrush caught her attention, and she looked up to see a bear watching her with intelligent eyes. Lila's heart raced, but she remained still, remembering the tales of the guardian bears. The bear approached cautiously, its nose twitching as it sniffed the air. To Lila's amazement, it gently nudged her hand, as if encouraging her to follow. Without fully understanding why, Lila found herself walking deeper into the forest, guided by this creature that seemed to embody the spirit of the land itself. The bear led her to a hidden grove she had never seen before. There, surrounded by ancient trees, stood a stone monolith, covered in strange markings. At its base grew a cluster of the famed golden-leaved plants, their leaves shimmering with an inner light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the forest around them. As Lila knelt to examine the plants, she felt a strange warmth in her pocket. Reaching in, she pulled out a small stone she had found near the research station earlier that week. To her astonishment, it was glowing faintly, pulsing in sync with the plants before her. In that moment, Lila understood that she had been chosen, just as the guardians before her had been. The forest was reaching out, inviting her to become part of its ancient cycle of protection and renewal. With trembling hands, she carefully collected a sample of the plant, knowing that this discovery would change everything. Returning to the research station, Lila threw herself into analyzing the new samples, What she found astounded her. The plants from the hidden grove showed remarkable resilience to climate stresses, their DNA containing sequences that allowed for rapid adaptation to changing conditions. It was as if they held the key to helping ecosystems survive in an increasingly unpredictable world. Excited by her findings, Lila expanded her research. She began to study not just the golden-leaved plant, but the entire network of life in the forest. She discovered that the plants were part of a vast mycelial network, connecting trees, shrubs, and even animals in a complex web of communication and resource sharing that allowed the ecosystem to respond to threats as a single, unified organism. As her understanding deepened, Lila realized that the forest was far more than just a collection of individual species. It was a living library of ecological wisdom, each part working in harmony with the others to maintain balance and resilience in the face of change. And at the heart of it all were the guardian bears, their ancient knowledge somehow encoded in the very fabric of the forest. Lila's work took on new urgency as she began to understand the implications of her discoveries. The adaptability she had observed in the forest could hold the key to helping ecosystems around the world cope with the impacts of climate change. The communication networks she had mapped could revolutionize our understanding of ecological resilience and inform more effective conservation strategies. But as Lila delved deeper into her work, she also became aware of a growing threat. The world outside the protected area was changing rapidly, with many ecosystems approaching tipping points that could lead to collapse. Lila knew that the knowledge contained within this forest could be crucial to addressing these global challenges, but she also understood the risks of exposing its secrets to the outside world. Determined to find a balance between protection and progress, Lila reached out to Aidan, now elderly but still a powerful advocate for the forest. Together, they began to develop a plan to share the forest's wisdom with the world, while still preserving its sanctity. They established a global network of seed forests, protected areas around the world, where the principles and even some of the species from the guardian bear's forest could be introduced and studied. They worked with indigenous communities to integrate traditional ecological knowledge with the lessons learned from the forest, and they launched a global education initiative using virtual reality and augmented reality technologies to allow people to experience the magic of the forest and learn about its importance to the planet's health. As their efforts gained momentum, Lila found herself spending more and more time in the forest. She began to form deep bonds with the bears, learning to read their subtle signals and understand their role in maintaining the health of the ecosystem. The carved stone she had found became a constant companion, its soft glow a reminder of her connection to this extraordinary place. One night, as Lila sat by the stone monolith in the hidden grove, she had a vision. She saw the forest as it had been thousands of years ago, watched it change and adapt over centuries. She saw the generations of guardian bears and human protectors who had come before her, each playing their part in preserving this sacred place. And she saw glimpses of possible futures, some filled with hope, others with devastation. As the vision faded, Lila understood that her role as a guardian went beyond scientific research or even conservation. She was a bridge between worlds, between past and future, between humanity and nature, between scientific knowledge and ecological wisdom. Her task was not just to protect the forest, but to help spread its teachings to a world in desperate need of healing. In the years that followed, Lila's work transformed the field of ecology and climate science. She developed new models for ecosystem restoration based on the principles she had learned in the forest. She worked with governments and organizations around the world to implement policies that recognized the inherent rights of nature. And she inspired a new generation of scientists, conservationists, and activists to see the natural world not as a resource to be exploited, but as a source of wisdom and a partner in creating a sustainable future. But even as her influence grew, Lila never forgot that her true calling was to the forest itself. She spent long hours walking the quiet paths, communing with the bears, and listening to the ancient rhythms of the land. The carved stone, now worn smooth from years of handling, remained her constant companion, a tangible link to the forest's deep magic. As Lila entered her later years, She began to think about the future of the forest and its guardians. She had mentored many young scientists and conservationists, but she knew that the choice of the next guardian was not hers to make. Just as the forest had chosen those before her, it would choose its next protector when the time was right. On the anniversary of her first arrival in the forest, Lila organized a gathering in the hidden grove with the stone monolith. Conservationists, scientists, indigenous leaders, and nature lovers from around the world came to pay tribute to the legacy of the guardian bears and to renew their commitment to protecting the natural world. As twilight fell, Lila stepped forward, the carved stone warm in her hand, and began to speak. She told the assembled crowd about Lucas, Emma, Zoe, and Aiden, about the bears, and about the countless other creatures that had played a role in protecting this sacred place. She spoke of the challenges they had faced and overcome, and of the battles yet to be fought in a world grappling with climate change and ecological crisis. But most of all, she spoke of hope for a future where humans remembered their place in the great web of life, where ancient wisdom and modern knowledge worked in harmony to heal the wounds of the earth. As Lila's words echoed through the grove, the monolith began to glow, pulsing with energy. The assembled crowd watched in awe as images appeared in the air around them, visions of the forest's past, present, and possible futures. As the visions faded, Lila felt a profound sense of peace wash over her. She knew that her time as the human guardian was drawing to a close, but she wasn't afraid. She had played her part in this ancient cycle, and now it was time for the next generation to step forward. Looking out over the crowd, Lila saw faces filled with wonder, determination, and love for this remarkable place. She knew that among them was the next guardian, though she couldn't say who it might be. The forest would choose, as it always had. As the gathering dispersed, Lila remained in the grove, sitting at the base of the monolith, with the carved stone cradled in her hands. A bear emerged from the shadows, a descendant of the guardians that had watched over the forest for generations. It settled beside her, a comforting presence in the growing darkness. Together, woman and bear sat in companionable silence, guardians of a legacy that stretched back through time immemorial. As the first stars appeared in the sky above, Lila closed her eyes and listened to the heartbeat of the forest. She felt profoundly grateful for the journey that had brought her here, for the wisdom she had gained, and for the hope that burned, bright for the future. The story of the guardian bears would continue, she knew. It would be told around campfires and in classrooms, in scientific laboratories, and in the halls of government. It would inspire countless others to take up the mantle of protecting the natural world, to seek harmony between human needs and the health of the planet. And here, in this forest that had seen so much, the ancient cycle of life, death, and renewal would go on. The guardian bears and their human companions would continue their sacred work, preserving a beacon of hope for a world in need of healing and reconnection with the wisdom of nature.